Yes, this is the Data Protection and Data Security GDPR second webinar of our IT series. My name is Nicole Kiriakou. I'm the HR advisor at SYLO Beyond HR. So, and what we'll be talking about today is I'll be giving you a quick update on where we are with GDPR post Brexit, along with a quick recap on GDPR principles. I'll then be talking about the kind of trends that we are seeing with data protection policies and procedures. And then I will briefly talk about what you need to be compliant as a business with data protection legislation. And my slides will finish with providing some information on what the contents are when it comes to a privacy notice and a data protection policy. At that point, I'll be passing over to Vin, who will talk about data as a valuable asset, why it's important, why we should protect it, also reining into the 3 pillars of people, processes and technology, all having a responsibility when it comes to cybersecurity. And he will also end his slides with some really useful hints and tips for all of us. So I'm here representing SYLO Beyond HR, which is a, I'll just move my screen here this side. So SYLO is a consultancy business mainly specializing in HR services. Sally and Sarah are the directors. We offer support in HR services, yes, but we also do provide support outside that remit. So we also provide assistance with business strategy, planning, executive coaching, counseling, and also mediation services. So quick update on where we are with GDPR post-Brexit. As part of the Brexit deal, the UK and the EU have agreed to a temporary arrangement whereby the UK will continues to process data coming in from the EU as per legislation that's been in place pre-Brexit. However, because this is only a temporary arrangement that is due to last up until June this year, the UK have put forward a proposal to the EU, which is what we call the UK GDPR. And this is a proposal that basically outlines the intentions that the UK has when it comes to how they will continue to process data from the EU from July onwards. So where we are at the moment is that we are currently waiting on an adequacy decision from the EU Data Protection Board on our UK GDPR proposal. Considering that we're quite close to the end of the temporary arrangement, which is up until the end of June, it's still a little bit unsure as to whether we will be receiving that adequacy decision. So it would be quite prudent. Well, it would be very prudent if businesses start putting in place adequate safeguards to ensure that there isn't any kind of disruption or interruption in data flows that are coming from the EU into the UK. And businesses can do this by putting standard contractual clauses in place. And more information can be found on how you can do this on the Information Commissioner's Office website. Or you can either contact us as well. We'll provide you some contact details at the end of this presentation. So now that we've provided some background as to where we are with GDPR, it's worth asking ourselves, do we still need to follow EU GDPR? And the very simple answer is yes, we do, but we would definitely have to follow EU GDPR if our business is one that relies on international data flows or targets European customers or also operates inside the European Economic Area. So if the answer to any of those items is yes, then you would definitely need to make sure you are still complying with EU GDPR, whilst also complying with UK GDPR and the Data Protection Act of 2018. So I've included this slide as well in the presentation for just a recap or a reminder of what the GDPR principles are. These are the 8 principles that also can be found in the UK GDPR. So I won't go into them in detail. However, if anyone does have any questions on these, you are absolutely more than welcome to ask these at the end of the presentation. So moving on to the kind of trends we're seeing when it comes to company policies and procedures for data protection. So in the HR industry, we see every day that different businesses are calling their policies and procedures all sorts of different things. And the most frequent names we've found are data protection policy and privacy notice. However, we have seen some more unusual names used for these policies, and that's, for example, data transfer security policy or international transfer agreement, and so on and so forth. And you'll also find data retention policy, accountancy policy. The point I'm trying to make here is what you call your policy or your procedure is really not important when it comes to compliance. It's what's in that policy that really matters to make sure that you are following legislation. And I will talk to you about what your policy requires in order to be compliant shortly. So first off, it makes sense to talk about what you would need as a business to be compliant as a bare minimum, and that is a privacy notice. The privacy notice is essentially a document that is designed specifically to inform data subjects in a very open and honest way as to what kind of data you're collating from them, why you're collating it, how, and also it's a document where you would also explain whether there are any third parties of which you share their data with, and it's also where you would specifically outline what the complaints procedure is for if someone wanted to make a complaint, and what the contact details are of the data protection officer in your business. So that sounds rather explicit and all well and good. However, there are some things that are not found on a privacy notice which we feel as HR professionals, we feel would be useful to have in a data policy. And this is why, as a consultancy business, we always recommend for best practice that a business has a data protection policy to complement their privacy notice, so that you are able to house information on what your internal processes are on things outside what is found in the privacy notice. So for example, what do you do if there is a breach? Who do you notify? Where can someone go to request access to their data, for example? So this slide, you'll see that there's two colored boxes. There's a blue one, there's an orange box. The blue one is what I've just discussed. It bullet points everything that a privacy notice that is compliant would have or would contain. What I would like you to focus on is the orange box. And this is the box that I will use to help hopefully convince you to understand why having a policy to complement your privacy notice is important. So the data protection policy, like I said, is where you would house details of your internal data protection procedures, such as how the business would deal with a potential data breach, how it goes about notifying persons affected by a breach and any relevant authorities if applicable. It's also the place where you would house your process on how someone can go about accessing their data. So this is what we would call a subject access request. And also it would inform the data subject how the business would treat a subject access request. Are there any deadlines that they need to abide by, etc. If your business deals with international data transfers, that's where you would put all that information there as to how you do that. And also the data protection policy is a really good place to put down any special circumstances of which data can be disclosed to third parties without consent. So for example, to help fight crime, if someone is suspected of criminal activities, then you have every right to share their data with the law enforcement agency to ensure that you are helping with fighting crime and any other circumstances that would apply. So hopefully that demonstrates the benefits of having a data protection policy to complement your privacy notice. Speaking of data breaches, I will now hand you over to my colleague Vin, who will be talking to you about data security from an IT perspective. I'll just stop sharing my slide. Bear with me a second. There we go.
Thank you, Nicole, and good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can see my screen as well, and you've got the relevant information there. So again, just a little bit about us, really. SP1, we provide IT support, IT strategic advice, cybersecurity, and as well as implementation of projects and related items. What we try and do is basically, well, we look after the IT for our clients so that they can focus on what they do best. And our mission is to help all businesses to work as efficiently and as safely as possible from anywhere. And that's why today I'm going to talk about the importance of data security and the risks and how we can work more safely in this new world of working. You know, we've all moved to this hybrid working, and there's a lot of different risks out there. So I'm just going to go into it in a bit more detail. So data is one of the most valuable assets, and it's both in a business as well as a personal context. It's always been essential for businesses to collect data, but the way we do it has evolved dramatically over the last 20 years or so. We've gone from storing records in filing cabinets to digital information on servers, on locally based systems, to sort of cloud-based systems now. So now with more and more people working from home in a hybrid scenario, data is more valuable than ever. And whilst technology has made it easier to find, it's also more susceptible to a data breach. And as we all know, data breaches can occur in a number of ways. It can occur in a cyber attack, or it can be perhaps an email's been sent to a wrong person, or simply a password has been compromised. So these are all really important aspects of why data is a valuable asset. So where are we today? So over the past year or so, no area has undergone more rapid transformation than the way we work. And as organizations shift to this hybrid model that we're seeing now, implementing new data security strategies is critical, absolutely critical to protect and guard against data and cyber threats. So why is data security so important? Well, across all industries, what we're seeing is increased levels of cybercrime. And the government study recently suggests that the risk level is potentially higher under COVID than it's been at any other point in time. And administering security measures during the pandemic is even harder than it always has been. There's basically been, you know, this is from government sources, 4 in 10 businesses and a quarter of charities have had cyber security breaches or attacks in the last 12 months. The NCSE has taken down 15 times more online scams in the UK during the pandemic. So it's vitally important that we stay on top of all this. I think overall it equates to a 400% increase in sort of like cybercrime and data breaches over the past year. And as data protection laws have become significantly more stringent, and with the introduction of the Data Protection Act in 2018, this places a burden of responsibility firmly on the people who control the data, which is, you know, us, businesses, our businesses. So with the data protection fines, I think ranging from £500,000 up to £17 million, or I believe 4% of your group's turnover. So, you know, for small businesses, this can be quite a significant amount. So data security has never been more important. Excuse me. So what's the risk? Well, as I highlighted, there's a monetary risk from the fines, but there's more to that than there's a monetary risk based on loss of business, loss of earnings. It hits the bottom line. You know, you might have orders that start coming in, or clients you start losing. So all that impacts on your business. But possibly more importantly, there's a risk of damaging the company's reputation and future business moving forward. We've seen plenty of times where companies end up in the news because of various data breaches. And in the past, it could have been like a sensitive document that's been left out in the open, or a laptop that's been stolen, or a computer that was left unattended for a few minutes and without password protection, and someone's siphoned off some information. So these were all sort of like previous risks, but there are also new risks now that are coming into force every day. There is something now that's termed insider risk. And this includes the unintentional leaks that occur because our security tools are overly complex. So what people try and do is they try and circumvent these security tools and procedures that, you know, companies put in place. And what that does is sort of like creates these insider and unintentional leaks. So what I'm essentially trying to say is there's got to be a balance. The shift to making work remotely and hybrid working means we need to have sort of like the right levels of access of people to get access to that data without them having to circumvent the security tools that have been put in place. And moving forward from this, I touched on the insider risk and why that's important. And, you know, we do have to have these security tools in place, but we just need to be careful of that as well. There are the other risks of phishing. You know, we've heard of all these sorts of different attacks, phishing attacks where emails are sent to you, you know, quite often giving you a sense of urgency to do something. So please check the sender's address to make sure it is legitimate. Does the message sound like the sender? Does the message fit in with current business practices? Does the message feel genuine? These are all the sort of things we need to check out for and look out for. Ransomware is commonly being delivered through phishing emails or dubious web links, and these can have a devastating effect on businesses. And then we've got man in the middle. May not have heard of that so much, but this is essentially to do with Wi-Fi networks. I can't stress the importance and dangers of using free Wi-Fi networks. Please do your due diligence. Make sure the Wi-Fi you're connecting to is the same that's being offered by the venue and not just someone who's broadcasting it from their phone or a laptop. So I could be sat in a coffee house with my laptop here, having my own Wi-Fi, calling it Starbucks free Wi-Fi, but the real Starbucks one could be called Starbucks Wi-Fi only. So, and then when you start connecting to that one, what you're doing is sending out your data across to them, and they're capturing all that information. So this is what's known as a man-in-the-middle attack. So please be wary of that. It's really important. One of the biggest data breaches around can happen through these means. And then we're hearing about social engineering, which is where you hear about more emails being sent to you purporting to be from the MD or saying, please, can you transfer some money to the client? You know, that sort of thing. So they try and sound like your MD might sound, or someone of importance within business who looks after the finances in the business. Then you've also got people who sort of like call into the office and asking for bank account details and all that sort of stuff. So it's vitally important that you have these policies and procedures in place. So we've talked about the risks. So we're moving to this hybrid model. So how do we protect our data? You know, whilst the overwhelming number of breaches were either accidental or due to human error, you know, like lost laptops, email sent to the wrong address, things like that, we're now increasingly seeing data breaches which are more technology related due to cyber attacks or viruses or malware. You know, recent examples of this could be, well, it is the NHS. You know, we've all heard of the NHS ransomware attack a couple of years ago, but only last year we had the Hackney Council in London, who were subject to a ransomware attack as well, right in the middle of a pandemic. So, and then obviously the other one, which is quite well known, is the Facebook data breach, where millions of people's sort of like personal details were breached on a website. So these are all quite serious sort of examples of data breaches. So how do we protect our data? Well, there are three pillars of data and cybersecurity. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through them and list them in order of importance from my point of view. So first and foremost, it's people, it's us. We're the foundation and front line of data and cybersecurity, and we're the primary target of most data breaches and cyber attacks. This then ties in with our processes and policies that are there to basically help and support us. They're designed to mitigate these risks presented to the businesses by governing the way in which we should operate during our working lives. And finally, technology. Technology is there to to help us keep control of these policies and procedures and help people control the way they use technology, sorry, the way they use data to ensure this remains secure. So, delving into this in a bit more detail, not too much, but just a bit more detail. You know, as I mentioned, first and foremost, it's us. We're the foundation and front line of ensuring data security. We're also the last line of defense. So it's important, you know, training is important. You know, we need to act like the human firewall. We need to wire our brains into thinking constantly about security. You know, as I mentioned before, the overwhelming number of case data breaches were caused by human error and carelessness. So as such, we need to know our responsibilities to help and prevent these cyber attacks. You know, we need to think about who sent this. Should I open this attachment? Should we plug this USB stick in that found in the coffee house? Should I install this app on my work phone? You know, we need to be aware of all these items. And then obviously, as Nicole mentioned earlier, we need to be aware of our GDPR and data security principles as well. You know, the risk of and loss of data, and we need to then report these sorts of things as well. So that's the people side of things. Then there's our process and policies also need to support us and mitigate these risks that are presented to the businesses. So security policy, you know, how should I conduct myself in my day job to ensure I'm protecting the business information? So that's what security policies should have. You know, they should also have information about what sort of information you should be able to send by email, how to check you're sending to the right email address, those sorts of things. Should have a password change policy. You know, this needs to be enforced on a regular basis. And if you're worried about using too many passwords or the complications of passwords, use a password tool like LastPass or 1Password, which will help you manage your passwords. Then, you know, enable processes and enable and implement two-factor authentication. This is vitally important, and this process and policy needs to be put in place to ensure that's in the business. And then obviously, we can't get away from backup procedures. We need to have the right policies to ensure we're following the right backup procedures, because in the event of a disaster, not just a cyber disaster or a data breach, it could be you know, a natural disaster, or it could be just a server failure or any type of failure. So backups have always been important. So ensure you have these procedures in place. And then finally, technology. Technology can help us prevent some of these common cyber attacks and data breaches, such as antivirus, anti-malware software. It's going to help us enforce the policy that I talked about just earlier on. Encrypting laptops, hugely important. You know, you think, well, why should I encrypt it? Well, if you lose your laptop, you're going to be less likely to suffer a data breach, because people aren't going to be able to A, get into it because of your passwords, B, if they grab the hard drive out and they try and put it into another machine, that hard drive is going to be encrypted, and it's going to be quite difficult to get that information out. So you're protecting yourself as well as the business. Ensure two-factor authentication, as I mentioned, is enabled. It's similar to what banks use, you know, a double way of your password and then authentication through other means of facial ID or fingerprint scanning or a text message where you input numbers. If you use Office 365 and you're not using this, I'd urge you to turn it on. If you're accessing your company's resources through sort of like a remote network connection, please ensure you use a VPN. And finally, I've talked about backups as well previously, because quite often, contrary to popular belief, Office 365 doesn't have a full backup solution. So you should always back up your products and your emails. So finally, some hints and tips. As I mentioned, update your antivirus and anti-malware software. Keep that up to date. Don't install unapproved software. Keep your computer's operating system up to date. You know, install the updates that Microsoft or Apple send out. Quite often, not only are these bug fixes, but these are security patches which constantly get updated. They're always sending these things out, so please do that. Never open email attachments that come from people you don't know. You know, don't be afraid to sort of question emails that come in and check with colleagues. Training. The key to making security a habit is to report suspicious and potential security issues, and you know, make training hugely important part of your business. I can't underestimate how or overestimate how important training is. And finally, vigilance. Always keep an eye out for anything suspicious. Don't be intimidated by people. Don't ask questions. Challenge risky behaviors. You know, a healthy dose of paranoia and skepticism goes a long way. So that sort of like brings me to the end of my presentation. I hope that's been useful.